Hey folks, this is Kalani. Professions are changing significantly in the Shadowlands expansion, and we finally have enough of the changes on the alpha to get a decent glimpse at how everything will look when the expansion finally goes live. Crafting is going to be a lot more interesting, fun, interactive, and potentially quite powerful. Let's work through all of the professions to see what's on offer and how each profession is shaping up. Because this is going to be a rather long one, I'll break it down in the comments section and give you some handy dandy timestamps so you can skip around to what you're interested in. Just don't look at the length of the video. We'll be fine. Before we jump in, if you weren't yet aware, we are streaming over at twitch.tv/KalaniTV. We go live every Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday and Saturday at 12 PM PST, which means we'll be live later today, so stop by and say hi if you have the time. Let's start with the gathering professions real quick. We need to know what raw materials we're going to be using before we can look at the crafting, right? Mining is always a good place to start. Again, for pretty much all of this, we have to look at the unlearned section of Shadowlands professions because we can't actually learn Shadowlands professions just yet, but at least we can get a good idea of how things are shaping up. For miners, you'll be collecting 6 different types of ore by the looks of things. A lithium ore is rare quality, which means this is probably the special one of the expansion. Hard to find and probably required for almost every good recipe. I wonder if you'll be able to find these nodes in every zone or only in a few, or maybe even just in the more. Ley-strite ore is the only common ore, which leads me to believe that it will be readily available in most zones, and I have found it in both Bastion and Revendreth, and I think we will see a lot of zone separation for gathering in this expansion because all 4 leveling zones are very distinct and the rest of the ore here kind of point towards that same theme. Oxine ore is gross and green and will almost definitely come from Maldraxxus. Phaedrum ore is purple and literally has the word Fey in the name, so that's going to come from Ardenweald. And then Sinvia ore makes it almost too easy, that will be from the Revendreth. Finthia, Sinvia, you see the connection I hope. And then Selenium ore is the only one which doesn't have an immediate telltale name or image, but the only zone left is Bastion. And solar ore would definitely fit the zone that resembles the heavens. Also, spoilers for later on, we know this is exactly where these ores come from thanks to the other professions. So 6 ores in total, 1 uncommon ore for each zone, and you will likely only be able to find those ores in the zones. 1 common ore that will most likely be available from every zone, and 1 rare special ore that will have more restrictions placed on it. One thing's for sure, we're going to need a lot of bag space. Moving on to Herbalism, which has nothing to look at just yet. Proof that we're still in early alpha and everything is subject to change and still in a state of work in progress. But that's not going to stop us from seeing what herbs we have to play with. Let's pop on over to Inscription and look at the milling options. They thought they could hide the herbs from us. Ha! So we have Mass Mill for Death Blossom, Marrow Root, Nightshade, Rising Glory, Vigil's Torch, and Widow Bloom. 6 herbs just like we have 6 ores. The Nightshade is the only uncommon or green herb, so that's probably our anchor weed for the expansion. The other 5 will be split into 1 for each zone, plus 1 for either the more, or just a general herb available in all zones. I have found Death Blossom both in Revendreth and in Bastion, so that's probably just a general herb. But whenever I do try to pick a herb on the alpha, it just says there's no loot, so it's still early days. Skinning is currently in the same boat with not much to see, but you will get a good look at the different types of leather and bone currently planned when we take a look at leatherworking. This might be the only gathering profession with significant differences because you will find beasts across multiple zones to skin and gut, and it looks like we'll only have 1 type of leather, 1 type of bone, 1 type of sinew, and then 1 type of scale from what I've seen from leatherworking. But we will have to wait and see for the most part with skinning. But the crafting professions are where things get really interesting. We're going to do this in alphabetical order because that's what I always do, even though I really want to start with blacksmithing to show you some of the crafting changes. But we'll get there soon, I promise. As for alchemy, it looks like we'll have plenty of potions to play around with. Going down the list, we start with a spiritual anti-venom. Cures poisons up to level 60 and reduces the duration of new poisons by 50%. Can't be used in instances though, so I guess not so useful for dungeons, raiding, or maybe even PvP, but certainly useful while you're out in the world. Then we have our very first Cauldron. Seems very typical. Give your party or raid members a flask, which will match their primary stat. Nothing too special here. here. The new combat potions might give us something exciting though. Potion of Deathly Fixation. Your damaging spells and abilities have a chance to apply Deathly Fixation to your target, dealing shadow damage over time and stacking up to 5 times. Upon reaching 5 stacks, the debuff explodes, dealing more shadow damage to the target. No mention of AoE, but if your weapon has Shadow Core Oil on it, the explosion damage is increased by 10%. So we do have some interactions between consumables already. Very interesting. Potion of Divine Awakening. Your healing spells are increased based upon the target's missing health, and if you have Embalmer's Oil on your weapon, the additional healing is increased by 10%. Those weapon oils are going to be very important, it would seem. Potion of Empowered Exorcisms. Your damaging spells and abilities have a chance to erupt your target's anima, dealing shadow damage to all enemies within 10 yards of the target. There's your AoE potion, and if you had the Shadow Core Oil on, the damage and range is increased by 20%. So you'll definitely want to be pairing certain potions with oils too. Potion of Hardened Shadows. This one is just a simple armor potion, useful for the tanks out there maybe. Potion of Phantom Fire. Your attacks and spells have a chance to send out a fiery projection, dealing fire and shadow damage. Damage is increased if you have Shadow Core Oil on your weapon. Potion of Sacrificial Anima. Your next 4 mana-consuming spells or abilities will consume 7% of your health instead of using mana. If you have the Embalmer's Oil on, the amount of health consumed is reduced by 2%. That one seems really cool, though potentially quite costly when you think about it. It lets any healer use a spell kind of like Lighter the Martyr from Holy Paladin, but it's only for 4 spells, and I assume you'll be locked to the same 1 potion per combat limit, making this potentially not worthwhile. I guess it depends on how much mana you would save, right? Potion of Spectral Agility. This one is just your bog standard agility potion, and I assume we'll get a few of these next. Potion of Spectral Intellect is the same thing, but for intellect. Then we have Spectral Stamina as well for a stam potion, and Spectral Strength for the strength potion. So that's all 3 primary stats covered in a combat potion as per usual, with the addition of a stamina pot. Potion of Spiritual Clarity. The good old sleep to re-again mana potion will be returning for Shadowlands, which should make the healers quite happy. And then we finish off with a healing potion, a mana potion, and a rejuvenation potion, which is just a healing and mana potion squished together in one convenient potion, which no one ever seems to use. Some interesting effects in there for sure. Let's move on to the flasks. We only have 2 to look at, the Int Flask and the Stam Flask. I assume the agility and strength ones are just missing for now, so take this with a grain of salt, but it looks like the Int Flask uses 5 out of the 6 available herbs in Shadowlands. These might end up being some quite expensive flasks. Here's one of the really cool new additions in Shadowlands, optional crafting items. These are still a work in progress, but we do have quite a bit to look at so far. The listed names are placeholder, but if you hover over the item, you do get an actual name. So this first one is Alchemists Pouch. You can add it to a piece of armor to increase the duration of flask effects. The good old alchemists get longer flask duration, so everyone's an alchemist will now be an optional addition to any piece of crafted gear. How cool is that? But that's not all. Slippery Concoction gives you a chance to increase your agility when attacking. Again, these are all optional pieces you can add onto crafted gear. We'll see how you do that when we get to blacksmithing. Bolstering Concoction gives you a chance to increase your strength while attacking. You can probably guess what the next one is going to be. Brilliant Concoction, a chance to increase your intellect while attacking. I wonder what the values will be like on this stuff. I can't wait to test it out for real. Culinary Concoction, increase the duration of well-fed effects. Just in case you didn't want to buy too many food buffs and you want to try cheese it and keep yours as long as possible. And then the last 3 are just placeholders for right now, but that means that they might have 3 more effects just waiting in the wings for alchemists for this new crafted gear option. Next up is the oils and extracts. Death Blossom Extract, used for many potions and tinctures, just needs some good old Death Blossom in a vial. Embalmer's Oil is the first weapon oil we get to look at. Apply to your weapon, giving your attacks and spells a chance to heal you. Lasts for 10 minutes, so you might have to reapply this stuff quite often. If you're already at max health, it gives you a smaller absorb shield instead, and that's actually pretty hype. Absorbs for overheals are a great mechanic and often very powerful. We have another extract, in fact we have an extract for every herb it looks like, so you might not use the herbs themselves in a lot of potions. You can see Marrowroot extract, Nightshade extract, Rising Glory extract, Vigil's Touch extract, and Widow Bloom extract. That might end up being kind of annoying actually, having to process all of the extracts before you can make certain potions instead of just using the raw herb. It's just adding an extra step, kind of like milling for scribes. There's one other weapon oil in here too, the Shadow Core oil. While applied to your weapon, give your attacks and spells a chance to deal extra shadow damage. Not quite as exciting, but at least it also interacts with those potions from earlier. We kind of have some transmutes to look at, but they're all placeholder. But this does tell me we should expect about 8 different transmute options for alchemists in Shadowlands. And then the Alchemy Stone will return as a trinket once again with the exact same effects, baseline versatility, chance to increase primary stat, and pumps up some potion effects. And to finish off alchemy, we have some utility potions. Potion of Shaded Sight increases your stealth detection for 10 minutes. Time to go catch all those sneaky rogues. Potion of Soul Purity attempts to remove 1 curse, disease, and poison from the drinker. No restrictions right now, so maybe you can take this one to dungeons. It does say attempt though, so it might not always work. Spectral Swiftness is a new speed pot with a twist. Increases speed by 100% while dead, just in case you weren't getting back to your body quickly enough. And Potion of the Hidden Spirit is the new Invis pot. Gain invisibility for 18 seconds. And that's all for alchemy so far. Pretty cool with the addition of weapon oils. Bit of a throwback to classic, unsurprisingly, with how well that's done recently. I imagine they're going to make quite a lot of gold at the start of an expansion as per usual too. Let's move on to blacksmithing. This is where professions really get going with the new changes. As you can see, blacksmithing has a lot of armor crafts right now. There are 5 different sets of armor you can craft. A bone grafted set, a ceremonious set, a Fey Wield set, a Sin Steel set, and then a Soul Forged set. Each set uses different materials which come from the different zones, and I would assume each set also has a very distinct transmog appearance. Sadly, all of the appearances are placeholder right now. It's all the cool Terran gear, so we'll have to wait to see what they actually look like. But if we scroll through the gear, you can see some of the recipes have spaces for optional regions. This is where you'll place those extra bonuses that we found in alchemy, and that you're going to see from almost every other profession. So this bone grafted helm has 6 slots for extra goodies. One is specific to increasing item level. This is an inscription bonus region and can add up to 20 item levels onto a suitable crafted piece of gear, from the list on the right anyway. That's pretty insane by itself, but then you can also specify a secondary stat that this item will roll by adding a gem cluster. So if you want haste, just lock in the haste gem and boom, guaranteed haste on that piece of crafted gear. Then there's space for 4 other bonus effects, like the procs we saw from alchemy: extra damage, extra stats, extra well-fed buff duration. There are so many bonuses to pick from. Crafting in Shadowlands is going to be very different from what we've seen so far in WoW. Everything is the same item level, 52, which is pretty low, but I expect that to be placeholder as well. Then you can just bump it up however much you want with the Words of Power from Inscription. All of the Soul Forged gear at the bottom has all of the bonus regions available, so maybe that's a bit closer to being finished, but let's have a look at the blacksmithing bonus crafting options. Beast Slayer's Charm increases the damage you deal to beasts if you put it into your crafted gear. Freak Slayer's Charm increases your damage to aberrations. I think I see a pattern here. Ghoul Slayer's Charm increases damage you deal to undead creatures. Man Slayer's Charm increases your damage against humanoids. Oh, here's a different one. Ley Strike Spikes can be put onto your armor to deal damage to any enemies that hit you with melee attacks. The shield spikes are back, except you might be able to put this on every armor piece to really ramp up that thorns damage. Can you imagine if every piece of gear you had thorns damage on it? There's also Ley Stripe Plates, which gives bonus armor to a plate or mail piece of gear. Odd that it specifies plate or mail, maybe leather tanks are out of luck for this one, and then the last 2 are placeholder, but that means that we might have 2 more to look forward to for blacksmithing. Blacksmiths will still get their skeleton keys, so you should be able to open any locked objects or chests in the Shadowlands expansion. There's also a shield to go along with the other sets, Bone Grafted, Ceremonious, Feywield, Sinsteel, and Soulforged. Again, we don't have any models to look at, but that will come with time. There are a few more crafting regions in here, but I think these are going to be different than the bonus effect things, all but to a placeholder, but down at the bottom we have Elysium Settings. Settings are usually dual crafting regions, so look out for those when we get to JC. The other item here is Shadowghast Ingot. This is going to be a very special ingot, as you will see shortly, which uses 5 different types of ore to create it. I would usually think that this would have a cooldown on it, but if we move on to the specialized armor section, you can see why we might not. Shadowghast arm guards, and breastplates, and actually every other slot you could want. For a quick tally, we have wrists, chest, hands, leg, helm, shoulders, boots, and belt. All of those slots are covered by these legendary crafted items, but you'll notice that they don't have any special stats or effects, so how can they be legendary? These will most likely be the base legendary item that you need to decide upon the slot your crafted legendary will occupy. So if you want to make a chest legendary, you'll need to craft this chest legendary piece, then attach the effects, stats, and every other legendary aspect to it in the special legendary crafting system. We don't have too many details about that just yet, but you can see right now these base items require a lot of Shadowghast ingots, 100 ingots and 15 lacedrite ore besides. You won't be able to craft every one of these base items right away, and it's going to be very time intensive or expensive. I am super excited to see how legendary crafting evolves over the course of the alpha though, but here's a little glimpse at just one piece of the puzzle. Then we also have some weapons, but before you get excited, none of these have models so far either, so it's all placeholder, but you can see we have an axe, a dagger, a two-handed sword, a mace, a sword, a two-handed axe, another dagger, a two-handed mace, a polearm, and a warglaive. And then you have all those weapons again for all 5 different sets available to blacksmiths. So if nothing else, you're going to have plenty of options as to what you actually want to craft and wear, and a lot of transmog to collect from crafting professions in general. And this is just one profession, we still have the others to go through too. Then down at the very bottom we have weapon mods. It's not just weapon oils that are coming back, we also have Sharpening Stones. Porous Sharpening Stone increases auto attack damage on bladed weapons. The Porous Weight Stones does the same thing but for blunt weapons, because sharpening a mace doesn't make too much sense. And then there's a better version called the Shaded Sharpening Stone and Shaded Weight Stone. The same thing, just more auto attack damage added than the Porous Stones. So you're going to need food buffs, weapon oils, potions, and sharpening stones in your bags. We're definitely going to get that classic feel for bag space again, aren't we? Alright, let's move on to Enchanting, which is a bit more straightforward, but no less exciting. Lots of enchants are coming back by the looks of things, or at least the ability to enchant more than just 2 or 3 pieces of gear. Just quickly looking at the list, we have Boot Enchants, Bracer Enchants, Chest Enchants, Cloak Enchants, Glove Enchants, Ring Enchants, and Weapon Enchants, with a few other bits and pieces scattered in there as well. Let's go through them. Boot Enchants first. Agile Soulwalker increases your agility by 12. Nice and easy. Eternal Agility increases your agility by 16. Alrighty then, more agility. And Speed of Soul temporarily increases your speed after killing an enemy. That is a fantastic boot enchant right there. It's Bear Tartar all over again. Bracer Enchants next. Eternal Intellect gives you 16 intellect, so maybe every stat is available for every smaller enchant like this, or maybe Bracers are for int and boots are agility only. Interesting choice. Let's continue. Illuminated Soul gives you 12 int, so there's the lower int enchant for Bracers, and Restorative Binding will heal you whenever you kill an enemy. So if you don't want the int, you take the heal, and if you don't want agi on boots, you take the movement speed? I guess that might be their thought process here. Chest Enchants next. Eternal Bound increases your intellect by 16 and increases your mana pool by nearly 10k. That's going to be amazing for healers, no doubt. Everyone wants extra mana. Eternal Bulwark increases your armor and your strength or agility. There's your tank enchant, still a bit boring though with passive stat increases. Eternal Skirmish increases your strength or agility and gives your auto attacks and auto shots a chance to deal extra shadow damage. Eternal Stats increases all stats by 16 and Sacred Stats increases all stats by 12. So a few options here, either bonuses to your mana, armor or damage, or just straight stats. Cloak Enchants are next. Fortified Avoidance increases stamina and avoidance, great for tanks. Fortified Leech increases stamina and leech, That one's going to end up being great for healers, no doubt, at least if Leech continues to be so powerful for them. And then there's extra stamina and speed. Movement speed is always nice, and then Soul Vitality gives you a good chunk of extra stamina if you don't want any of the other options. Moving on to glove enchants, we have Eternal Strength, which is the plus 16 strength enchant, Shadowlands Gathering, which increases the speed of gathering in Shadowlands, no more swapping for mining, herbing or skinning it would seem, great change there, just one for all of them, and then another smaller strength enchant with the plus 12. And then we come to some bonus effect crafting items. Flame Steel Rod allows you to blast an enemy with fire damage, which sounds like an on-use effect. A bonus effect reagent can give you an on-use effect? That's super cool. Kind of like Engineering Tinkers. The rest of them are placeholder sadly, but I would expect maybe some other forms of damage. Frost damage, arcane damage, anything else related to enchanting could fit in here. Either way, expect maybe another 7 bonus effects to come from enchanting to use on all of your crafted gear. Here's another blast from the past, Enchanted Raw Materials. We have Enchanted Desolate Leather, Enchanted Grim Iron Bar, and Enchanted Shrouded Silk. So, enchanters are going to be very important for high-level crafting, no doubt. I don't think we've seen anything that requires this stuff yet, but again, we are still getting an early look at professions. Ring enchants seem to work like they do right now, bargains and tenets of secondary stats. So crit, haste, mastery and verse are covered by 2 tiers of ring enchants. The bargains give 12 stats and the tenets give 16 stats. Pretty straightforward. We have some conversion recipes as well, dust to shards, shards to crystals. I'm happy to see that these will be available from the start and we won't have to wait a few patches to be able to break them up by ourselves. There's 2 wands to craft, a lower tier and a higher tier. Neither have new models I'm afraid, but they do seem quite cheap to craft right now, so they're probably just placeholder regardless. And last but not least we have weapon enchants. Ascended Vigor. Enchant a weapon to sometimes increase your healing received when taking damage. That's actually going to be incredibly powerful for any self-healing tanks, and just generally useful for every other tank. Celestial Guidance gives you a chance to gain intellect when attacking or using spells. Standard int enchant then. Eternal Grace enchants a weapon to send out a wave of healing energy in all directions from the caster when casting healing spells and abilities. A free little burst of AoE healing is always nice. Lightless Force enchants a weapon to have a chance to send out a wave of shadow energy in front of you when you use spells and abilities, so the DPS will get an AoE as well, but a frontal wave instead of an all-around AoE. And then Sinful Revelation enchants a weapon to allow your offensive spells and abilities to apply a debuff to your target, increasing the damage they take from the school associated with a triggering spell or ability. That one is actually super interesting. If anyone in your raid benefits from that enchant triggering, you could increase more than just your own damage. Frost mages could buff Frost Death Knights and vice versa. Fire mages and Destro Locks, Affliction Locks and Shadow Priests. There's a lot of overlap with schools of magic and types of damage. That could end up being a very powerful enchant, and it's honestly just a great idea. Let's move on to engineering, the good old let's have some fun profession. Working down the list, we start with belt attachment. The damage retaliator attaches a device that, when activated, magnetically suspends several small bladed weapons around you, causing any attackers to take damage. Yes, yes, and more yes. I can't wait to see what this actually looks like. I hope they don't skimp on the animation for this one, that could be so cool. The dimensional shifter allows you to try, emphasis on try, to turn invisible while out of combat. I hope that breaks in weird and wonderful ways. And then electro jump allows you to generate a mini wormhole, teleporting forward a short distance. Engineers get a mini blink then, I guess. We wouldn't be engineers without bombs now, would we? The bomb bowler launcher throws a tethered bomb in a straight line, and they wrap to the first enemy hit and explode after 5 seconds, dealing AoE damage. A skill shot bomb. That's definitely new. Shadowland mines allow you to set up a mine that will explode when an enemy steps on it, dealing damage and knocking everything backwards. And then we also have the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch. Arden Wield. Deal holy damage to enemies in a 5-yard radius. The Holy Hand Grenade is actually the most straightforward bomb. Imagine that. And then we also have some new devices. The Momentum Redistributor Boots transfers damage you would take from falling into an AoE around you when you land. If you ever wanted to actually superhero land on top of mobs and just destroy them, Well, now you can. The portable micro-more cannon allows you to create a mini black hole, sucking enemy players towards it, and sometimes sucking you towards it as well. That's going to be a lot of fun in PvP. There's also a Wormhole Generator for Shadowlands, so we can jump around the map as per usual. The Soul Trap lets you pop down a trap that will banish the first enemy that steps on it. Unless it backfires, of course. Some easy crowd control for engineers there. Unless it backfires, of course, in which case I hope it kills you. And then we also have 4 sets of glider kits, which I am actually super excited to see in action. The Fairy Glider Kit, Kyrian Glider Kit, Maldraxian Glider Kit, and Stoneborn Glider Kit. You just know they're going to have different wings on the glider, and it's going to be awesome and amazing, and we need this in our lives right now. Hopefully professions will be learnable sometime soon. Goggles aren't going anywhere either. We have 4 pairs right from the get-go, 1 for each cloth, leather, mail, and plate, and they all have 3 bonus effects you can add to them. An item level effect, a secondary stat effect, and then 1 bonus effect. Crafted gear is going to be so interesting in Shadowlands. And then we also have some parts creation. The worm-fed gear assembly, which sounds absolutely delicious, the mortal coiled spring, good one Blizzard, the porous polishing abrasive, and then a handful of lace-striped bolts. I guess most of this will just be used in other engineering recipes. Engineers also get 2 scopes. The infragreen reflex sight has a chance to increase your haste when using a ranged weapon, and the optical target embiggener has a chance to grant you crit when using a ranged weapon too. There's also 2 craftable guns. Neither use a new model, so I guess we'll probably just have to wait for all crafted gear models at this point. And then the last thing is the pocket Colossus. This is something we can actually look at. It's just the big anima constructs that you see in Bastion, except I expect it to be very small, and it's a little companion that you can drag around all over the place. Kind of thin for engineering right now, but some very interesting and potentially fun effects to make use of. Up next is Inscription. It looks like there'll be 3 inks which use 3 different pigments, so even though we have lots of herbs to mill, they'll break down into 3 pigments max. Tranquil Pigment and ink, Luminous Pigment and ink, and Umbral Pigment and ink. The Inscription bonus regent for crafting is called Word of Power. Even though we only see 1 Word of Power here, some other crafted gear had space for Word of Power 1 through 4, with the bonus effect giving you plus 5 item levels per level, so a Word of Power 4 was giving plus 20 item levels. We have no idea if that's the final design, but you can see Inscription will probably be very useful if they keep that bonus effect region in. Everyone is going to want extra item levels after all. There's a new codex and tome for swapping talents on the go, and a new lockpicking scroll called Writ of Grave Robbing. Quite fitting for a death expansion, I suppose. Then we also have contracts again, so they aren't going anywhere anytime soon. There's 1 contract for each leveling zone, so 1 for Maldraxxus, 1 for Bastion, 1 for Ardenweald, and 1 for Revendreth, so it's safe to assume that each of those will have a faction that everyone is capable of farming rep with. Your Covenant choice is probably going to be a separate grind. The next item on the list is the new Dark Moon cards, and there's a bit of an interesting twist this time. You can create a random card of any deck as per usual, but sometimes you will get a blank card of a deck instead. That blank card can then be used on the next 4 recipes to craft a card from that specific deck. So this might not seem too amazing, but it does give you another opportunity to purchase a random card from a set you want, or to gamble in a smaller pool of cards. It's a small change, but it might help you complete certain decks faster. I can't wait to see if these decks will end up being powerful or worthless. There doesn't really seem to be an in-between for Dark Moon card decks at the start of an expansion. There's also a new Vantus rune for Castle Nathria, so I guess they like how Vantus runes work so far because they will be returning in Shadowlands. A handful of staff crafting recipes, nothing too special here, and no bonus effects just yet, so maybe these recipes aren't finished either. Some offhands with the same dealio. There's 2 tiers to craft, but no option for bonus effects and no secondary stats for now. And then the last in the Inscription is the mass milling, which we've already looked at. 1 mass mill for each of the 6 herbs available, so let's move on to jewel crafting. Jewel crafting is going to work a little differently when compared to normal. They still have 2 tiers of each gem, 1 uncommon and 1 rare, so you start with the rare gems as per usual, but now rare gems can also be used as an optional crafting regent themselves to lock in a choice of secondary stats on a crafted piece of gear. So you can use them as you always did. Throwing a crit gem into a socket on gear will give you crit, fantastic, but now these jewel clusters can also be used in crafting recipes. If the recipe lets you use one and you put a crit gem in with a craft, that piece of gear will have crit on it guaranteed. I think that's really cool, and this is also used in the legendary crafting process, by the way, to choose which stats you want on your legendary, or at least choose one of the two secondary stats. We're not sure if you get to choose one or both of them, but you can still at least choose one. They're definitely wanting to give us meaningful choices when it comes to crafted gear, including legendary crafting, and just give us the choice for ourselves. You know, we want crit. Give us crit. Don't make us re-roll this over and over again until we get the stats we want. We can just do it right from the start. The 4 secondary stats are covered in the clusters, and they're also covered in the doublets, the uncommon gems. But there are 2 other gems in here as well. The Revitalizing Jewel doublet is a red gem that restores 100 health for every Shadowlands gem you have. That's a very interesting effect, especially if you can gather up a lot of gems. That could potentially be crazy powerful if you have a lot of sockets on your gear. And then the Straddling Jewel doublet increases your speed for every gem you have as well. If this stacks and counts as a Shadowlands gem, you might be able to put all speed gems in your sockets and get some crazy movement speed going. Combine that with the speed boosts when you kill something, and you can fly through old raids and dungeons. Then we also have a mass prospect for each of the 6 ores we already know about. Hopefully some of these will yield some great gem results, and it's always nice to see mass milling and mass prospecting is still in the game. Doing that one by one sure took a lot of time. Jewel crafting will also be able to make some bonus effects for crafted gear. We only have one right now to look at, the rest are placeholder, but the Freezing Diamond will give your armor a chance to cause enemies to take more damage from frost attacks. They could copy paste that effect for every school of magic and type of damage to fill out the rest of these placeholders, but we'll have to wait and see what else they can come up with. That's definitely going to be great for Frost Death Knights and Frost Mages though. Then we also have some necklaces to craft too. There's 2 tiers, some rare and some uncommon, and it looks like the rare ones will be using the zone specific ores, while the uncommon lower tier necklaces will be using the ley strike that can be found in any zone. The same goes for the rings, one for each secondary stat. The rare ones use the special ore and the uncommon ones use the common ore. All of the necks and rings will come with a socket, so they might end up being quite valuable as crafted pieces. And then the last thing we have to look at is specialized jewelry, Shadowghast necklace and Shadowghast ring. The recipe for these items is probably not finished because the blacksmithing legendary base items seem to cost quite a lot of materials, while these necks and rings seem to be cheap as chips. They're going to serve the same purpose though. If you want to make a legendary ring or necklace, you will need one of these base items. Note that they are bind on equip, so you can sell and trade these if you so wish, and obviously buy them if you don't want to level the profession yourself, which means they're probably going to be great money makers early on too. Let's move on to leatherworking. There are a lot of recipes here, but most of it is just because there's 5 sets just like blacksmithing, except there's 5 sets for leather and 5 sets for mail. But let's start at the top. It looks like leatherworkers will use a bunch of different tiers of leather. We have heavy desolate leather hides, which are made from desolate hides. We have desolate leather, which is made from leather scraps. Then we also have heavy desolate leather, which is made from desolate leather. So you'll be upgrading your leather as you go. Then we also have some crafted effects. The loosened belt strap will increase the duration of your well-fed effects. Quite an appropriate name then. The flame-licked leather padding will shield you periodically, giving you a fire damage absorb shield. That could be pretty interesting in any fire damage heavy encounter. The last 2 we have a placeholder, so no info on those just yet. The next 4 items in here are pretty interesting though. 4 new types of leather that you can create from desolate leather and some zone specific materials. It looks like you will need the zone's herbs as well as the zone's ore. That's actually a lot to ask for when you think about it. You would need the raw materials from all 3 gathering professions to make this leather. Let's hope it isn't used in absolutely everything. The name in the list also doesn't match the name when you hover over it, so unseelie leather, purified leather, necrotic leather, and sinful leather is what we'll actually be working with. The last item on this materials list is desolate leather hide, which can be made from scraps, probably if your skilling isn't high enough. We will also see the return of armor kits, which will give you a stam boost on your chest, legs, hands or feet for 2 hours with an item level restriction. That's a bit odd, but this means that would be great for leveling potentially. There is a heavy armor kit and a normal armor kit, but they both do the same thing right now, so that's obviously not finished. We have another set of leatherworking drums. Bear in mind that drums have had their effectiveness reduced quite a bit from what I understand. They only provide 15% haste now, so it's even less of a bloodlust than before, but 15% is still better than nothing. And then we have the Masterwork Leather and Masterwork Scale items. These are the leather and mail base legendary pieces which you would need to start crafting legendary gear. Interestingly, these items say this piece of gear would have the potential to be infused with power to become a legendary item. I don't think the blacksmithing one said that at all. All of the same slots are covered for both leather and mail items, so just know that leather workers will be responsible for 2 armor types again, while blacksmithing and tailoring will only have 1 armor type each. Then we also have some other types of crafted gear. The lowest tier here is Desolate Leather Gear and Sorrow Scale Mail Gear. The Desolate Gear just requires Desolate Leather for all of the pieces, while the Sorrow Scale Gear requires Desolate Bone. That doesn't sound too right, so that might be placeholder or wrong. All of those items only have an item level bonus effect slot too, but again, most of this will still be a work in progress. Then we have the zone specific set. This is where that special leather comes into play, I guess. Fey leather armor requires heavy desolate hides and the unseelie leather, as well as the heavy hides and desolate sinew. That could end up being incredibly expensive to make, so I hope it ends up being worthwhile. The Fey scale gear requires the same stuff, except instead of leather, you're using sorrow scales. I imagine the lower tier gear is meant to use the scales instead of bones as well. All of this has placeholder models before you start asking me to show it off, so again we'll just have to wait and see what crafted gear actually ends up looking like, and then you have the same thing for the other zones. Purified leather for the Kyrian leather and scale armor, necrotic leather for the Necrolord leather and scale armor, and sinful leather for the Venthyr leather and scale armor. Lots of sets, lots of transmog, and lots of materials to collect. Then right down near the bottom we have the weapons. Leatherworkers can craft bows, crossbows, and fist weapons as per usual. I've noticed that no weapons have any bonus effect slots yet, so I wonder if weapons won't have any reagents to use to get any bonus effects, or if they just haven't gotten around to that yet. And the very last item on the list, a new mount equipment slot to prevent you from being dazed, just in case you hadn't got one that lets you do that yet. And then we finally move on to tailoring, which doesn't really have too many new concepts. We have a crafting reagent called Frozen Thread, which gives you a chance to increase the frost damage that you deal. The rest are placeholder for now, but they might increase other schools of magic like we've seen in other professions. Then we have some sets to craft, but from what I can see right now, they all use the same items. There's Shrouded Cloth, Lightless Silk, and Penumbra Thread. They're all used for the different sets, so nothing too exciting for tailoring just yet. We could be missing something here, or they could just be getting the short end of the stick, or the best end of the stick, depending on how you feel about it. If you don't have to farm specific zone stuff, it's just a lot easier to make, really, isn't it? But once again, all of this is placeholder model wise, so nothing to look at either. We also have Grim Veiled items to craft. These are the cloth legendary base items that you'll need to start your legendary crafting. What is really interesting to me is that these require 20 enchanted lightless silk each, and that's an enchanting recipe if you remember. So without an enchanter, you'd be out of luck for this legendary item craft. Below that we have some more basic cloth crafts called Shrouded Cloth. They have lots of bonus effect slots and they're a lot cheaper to make, so I guess this is the lower tier of cloth gear. And of course First Aid is not making a comeback in Shadowlands, so we also have the bandages down at the bottom. A Shrouded Cloth bandage and a heavy Shrouded Cloth bandage to go along with it, just to make sure the tailors out there can patch up a cut or two on the field of battle. Now you may have noticed so far that none of these professions have had any ranks tied to any of the skills. No ranks for gathering skills, no ranks for crafting recipes, no ranks anywhere at all. That might be because they haven't implemented them yet, or they may have decided to leave that particular feature behind. And that's all the profession changes we have to look at so far. I'm really excited with how this is shaping up, and I can't wait to actually test some of the bonus effects and proper crafting. This will be so much easier when we can copy characters over, so we don't have to farm the materials by hand. But honestly, I can't wait for that. As soon as we can mine and herb and skin properly, I'm going to be out there farming professions on the alpha, just so we can see how crafting actually works with these bonuses. Increasing item level, dealing extra damage, getting random stats, stat procs. I think it's going to be great, but that's all for this video. What do you think of the profession changes from what you've seen so far? Does any profession get you super pumped for Shadowlands? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. If you haven't caught our stream yet, we go live on twitch.tv/KalaniTV every Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday and Saturday. So if you're watching this video early, I should be live at 12 PM PST today. Stop by and say hi. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and our subscribers on Twitch. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time. I can't believe I made a 40-minute video.